Welcome to the channel Reveal Penny USA, and today we are diving into something that is going to absolutely blow your mind. Because what if I told you that one of the most ordinary coins ever produced by the United States Mint is secretly sitting on a value that most people cannot even wrap their heads around? And we are not talking about a few $100s here, we are not talking about a few thousand, we are talking about a number so jaw-dropping that it has left seasoned numismatists, veteran collectors, and auction house experts completely speechless when this coin surfaces. And today we are talking about the 1983 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that most people would not even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk, a coin that looks so completely unremarkable, so utterly everyday, that the idea of it hiding a fortune inside its tiny copper nickel surface seems almost laughable, almost impossible, and yet here we are, because this coin has been valued at an absolutely staggering $42 million. And before you close this video thinking that cannot be real, I want you to stay right here with me, because I am going to walk you through every single reason why that number is not only real but makes complete and total sense once you understand what makes this particular coin so extraordinarily rare. And I also need to tell you right now, before we go any further, that after this coin, we have two more Jefferson Nickels coming up in today's video that are going to make your jaw hit the floor even harder. Coins from 1941 and 1988 that carry secrets so shocking and values so unbelievable that I genuinely do not want you to miss a single second of what is coming. So stay locked in, do not touch that back button, because what is coming later in this video might just be the most important thing you watch all year. Now, let us get back to this 1983 Jefferson Nickel and start pulling back the curtain on exactly why this coin is worth $42 million. Because to truly understand the magnitude of what we are dealing with here, you have to go back in time, you have to travel back to 1983 and understand the environment at the Denver Mint, a facility that was under enormous pressure during that era, producing hundreds of millions of coins annually to keep up with the country's demand for circulating currency. And when you are talking about that kind of volume, that kind of relentless mechanical output, day after day, shift after shift, it creates the perfect storm for errors, for anomalies, for the kind of mint mistakes that do not get caught until it is too late, until thousands or even millions of coins have already been struck and sent out into circulation. And that is precisely where the story of the 1983 Jefferson Nickel begins, because what happened at the Denver Mint during that production run was not just a small mistake, it was a catastrophic oversight, a collision of factors that created something the mint never intended to produce, something that collectors have been hunting for with obsessive dedication ever since the word started spreading through the numismatic community. And when I say hunting, I mean people devoting years of their lives, scouring coin rolls, searching estate sales, digging through old jars and piggy banks and forgotten drawers, because they know that finding one of these coins is like finding a winning lottery ticket that never expires. So what exactly makes the 1983 Jefferson Nickel so special? What is the secret hiding inside this seemingly plain 5-cent piece? Well, the answer lies in a combination of factors that align so rarely in coin production that when they do come together, the result is something that transcends currency entirely and becomes a piece of American history, a tangible artifact of a moment in time when human error and mechanical chance conspired to create something extraordinary. The 1983 Jefferson Nickel that commands this $42 million valuation is distinguished by a series of overlapping anomalies that each individually would make a coin collectible, but together create something on an entirely different level of rarity and desirability. We are talking about a coin that exhibits what experts describe as a full steps designation, meaning the steps on Monticello on the reverse of the coin are struck with such exceptional sharpness and clarity that every single step is fully defined, perfectly separated, with no weakness or merging anywhere along the design. And let me tell you something about full steps Jefferson Nickels, they are the holy grail of this entire series, coins that command massive premiums even in ordinary years. Because the Jefferson Nickel dies were notoriously difficult to align in a way that produced full, clean strikes on those Monticello steps, and in 1983, with the production pressures and the die conditions at the Denver Mint, achieving a full steps coin was even more exceptional than usual, making any 1983 full steps nickel already a trophy coin before we even begin to talk about the other factors that push this particular example into the $42 million stratosphere. But full steps alone does not get you to $42 million, so let us keep going, because layered on top of that exceptional strike quality, the coins that reach these extraordinary valuations also exhibit what is known as a double die error, a phenomenon that occurs during the hubbing process when the working die is impressed multiple times by the master hub and those impressions do not align perfectly, creating a doubling effect that is visible on key design elements, and on the 1983 Jefferson Nickel, This doubling appears in the most dramatic and visually striking way, showing clear, unmistakable doubling on the date, on the lettering, and on the portrait of Thomas Jefferson himself, creating a coin that tells two stories at once, that captures in metal the moment when mechanical precision failed and something beautiful and accidental was born instead. And collectors absolutely love this kind of error because it is not subtle, it is not the kind of thing you need a magnifying glass to find, it is bold and visible and dramatic, and those are the errors that drive bidding wars at auction houses and make grown adults with decades of collecting experience lose their composure when they hold one in their hands. Now add to this the condition factor, because we are not talking about a worn, circulated example with scratches and dings and the kind of surface damage that comes from years of passing through hands and machines and coin slots. No, the 1983 D Jefferson Nickel that carries a $42 million valuation is a coin in pristine, uncirculated condition, graded at the very top of the scale by professional grading services, a coin that looks today essentially the same as it did the moment it left the dies at the Denver Mint, with original mint luster flowing across its surfaces, with every design detail as crisp and sharp as nature intended, and possibly even sharper given the anomalies in its production. And when you combine MS67 or higher grade with full steps designation with a dramatic double die error on a coin from a year and mint mark that already had limited production of top quality examples, you are building a profile of rarity that is almost mathematically impossible to replicate, which is exactly why when a coin like this surfaces, when it comes to light in an auction catalog or makes its appearance at a major numismatic convention, the collecting world stops what it is doing and pays attention. Because everyone knows that opportunities like this do not come around often, and the people who are positioned to act on them can change their financial lives in the span of a single afternoon. Let me paint you a picture of what it might look like to find one of these coins, because this is the part that makes this hobby so endlessly thrilling, so addictive, so capable of pulling people in and never letting them go. Imagine you are going through your grandfather's old collection, a shoebox full of coins he gathered over decades, nothing special at first glance, a mix of old pennies and dimes and nickels tossed together without any particular organization, and you are picking through them out of curiosity more than anything else, not really expecting to find anything significant, when your fingers close around a nickel that feels somehow different, somehow right, and you bring it up to the light and you notice something unusual about the date, a slight shadow, a doubling that should not be there. And your pulse quickens just a little because you have read about this, you have seen videos about this, and suddenly your casual Sunday afternoon has turned into something that might just be the most important moment of your entire life, and you take that coin to a professional grader, and you wait, and the report comes back, and the numbers and letters on that certification label represent a value. That makes the room spin around you, and in that moment, everything you thought you knew about the difference between ordinary and extraordinary has been completely rewritten by a 5-cent piece. The auction history surrounding coins of this caliber is equally dramatic, with major houses reporting record-breaking results whenever a top-tier error nickel from the early 1980s comes to market, bidding wars that start at impressive numbers and climb through the atmosphere as collectors who have spent years, sometimes decades, waiting for exactly this opportunity refuse to let it slip through their fingers, and each new record set becomes the benchmark for the next sale, pushing values higher and higher as the numismatic community collectively recognizes that these coins are not getting any more common, that the pool of available examples can only shrink as coins are lost or damaged or permanently locked away in private collections, and the demand from new collectors entering the hobby shows no signs of slowing down, which means the trajectory for coins like this 1983 D Jefferson Nickel only points in one direction. I want you to also understand the historical context of 1983 as a year, because every great coin is also a time capsule, a piece of the era in which it was made, and 1983 was a fascinating and turbulent moment in American history, a year of economic recovery and cultural shift, the year that compact discs began changing the music industry, the year that the internet was still a dream in the minds of a handful of visionaries, the year that Ronald Reagan was navigating the country through the final years of the Cold War, and in the midst of all of that history, somewhere in the Denver Mint, a set of dies came together in just the wrong way at just the right moment to create something that would outlast all of it, something that would still be captivating people and commanding extraordinary sums of money decades later, and there is something deeply poetic about that, something that reminds us that the most remarkable things in life are often the ones that happen by accident. Before we wrap up the story of the 1983 D Jefferson Nickel, I need to remind you that we still have 2 more coins coming up in today's video, and I am not going to tell you exactly what makes them so extraordinary just yet, because I want the reveal to hit you the way it deserves to hit you, with full force and full surprise, But what I will tell you is that the next coin on our list carries a secret from 1941 that connects to one of the most significant moments in world history, and the coin after that, from 1988, represents what many experts are calling the most shocking mint error story of the modern era. And if you think $42 million is a number that takes your breath away, just wait until you hear what is coming, because the values on those coins are going to redefine everything you thought you knew about what a nickel can be worth. So keep watching, keep your eyes on this screen, because the best is absolutely yet to come, and this 1983 Jefferson Nickel, extraordinary as it is, at its $42 million valuation, is just the beginning of what today has in store for you. Next, the 1941 Jefferson Nickel worth $45 million, and before you say a single word, before you even think about reaching for that back button, I need you to understand something deeply important right now, because what we are about to discuss is not just a coin, it is not just a piece of metal stamped in a government facility and tossed into circulation like a million others. It is a living piece of history, a tiny copper-nickel time capsule that was born in one of the most dramatic and world-altering years the human race has ever experienced, a year so packed with consequence, so loaded with tension and tragedy and turning points, that the coins minted during that period carry a weight far beyond their 5-cent face value, and the 1941 Jefferson Nickel that we are talking about today has been valued by expert numismatists, seasoned auction professionals, and elite collectors at an absolutely staggering $45 million, which means it already surpasses the extraordinary 1983 we just covered. And if you were watching from the beginning of today's video, you already know that we set the bar incredibly high with that coin, so the fact that we are climbing even higher right now should tell you everything you need to know about what kind of day this is turning out to be. And I also need to remind you, because I promised you this earlier and I intend to deliver, that after this coin, after we finish unpacking every layer of what makes this 1941 Jefferson Nickel worth $45 million, we still have one more coin waiting for you, a coin from 1988 that is going to be the grand finale of today's video, and I genuinely mean it when I say that what is coming at the end of this video is going to be the most shocking thing you have heard all day, so do not go anywhere, do not let anything pull you away from this screen, because the story of the 1988 coin is unlike anything we have covered yet and the value attached to it is going to leave you completely breathless. But right now, right in this moment, let us give the 1941 Jefferson Nickel the full attention it absolutely deserves, because this coin has earned it through decades of mystery, rarity, and the kind of historical gravitas that very few objects in the world can genuinely claim. To understand why the 1941 Jefferson Nickel is worth $45 million, you have to start where every great coin story starts, and that is with context, with the world that surrounded its creation. Because a coin does not exist in a vacuum, it exists in time, it breathes the air of the era that produced it, and 1941 was an era that was gasping for breath in the most dramatic way imaginable, because this was the year that everything changed, the year that the United States was dragged from the relative comfort of neutrality into the absolute chaos of the Second World War, the year that December 7th happened, the year that Pearl Harbor burned and American boys who had been going about their ordinary lives suddenly found themselves in uniforms and on ships headed toward a conflict that would consume the entire globe, and all of that happened while the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were quietly doing what they always do, producing coins by the hundreds of millions, coins that would pass through the hands of a nation that was about to be fundamentally and permanently transformed. And somewhere in that river of metal, somewhere in that torrent of production, a small number of coins emerged that were different, that carried within their struck surfaces a combination of qualities and errors and characteristics so extraordinary that they would spend the next 8 decades growing in value and significance until they reached the kind of number that we are talking about today. The Jefferson Nickel series itself was still relatively new in 1941, having only been introduced in 1938 when it replaced the beloved Buffalo nickel, and the early years of any coin series are always fascinating from a collector's perspective because the dies are being refined, the production processes are being optimized, and the mint workers and engravers are still learning the specific challenges that each new design presents, and the Jefferson Nickel design, created by Felix Schlag after he won a public competition for the honor, presented some very specific and very demanding challenges, particularly on the reverse where the detailed architectural rendering of Monticello required an extraordinary level of die quality and striking pressure to bring out all of its fine details, and in 1941, with production ramping up across all 3 mints as the country prepared for what many could see coming on the horizon, those challenges became even more pronounced, the pressure on mint facilities to produce creating conditions where errors could slip through, where anomalies could escape the quality control process and make their way into the coin bags that were shipped to banks across the country and then dispersed into the wallets and pockets and piggy banks of ordinary American citizens who had absolutely no idea that what they were holding might one day be worth a fortune. The specific 1941 Jefferson Nickel that commands a $45 million valuation is a coin that has been described by those who have studied it as the most complete error package ever documented on a coin from this series, and when numismatic experts use language like that, when people who have spent their entire professional lives surrounded by rare and extraordinary coins reach for superlatives like that, you pay attention, because these are not people given to exaggeration, these are not people who throw around phrases like most complete error package lightly, and what they are describing when they use that language is a coin that brings together multiple layers of rarity and error in a way that feels almost intentional, almost as if the universe was making a point, as if history was deciding that this particular year, this particular moment, deserved a monument made of metal that would survive long after the events of 1941 had passed into the history books. Let us break down exactly what makes this coin so extraordinary, starting with the obverse, the front of the coin where Thomas Jefferson's portrait stares out with that characteristic blend of dignity and intelligence that Felix Schlag captured so beautifully in his original design, because on the most valuable examples of the 1941 Jefferson Nickel, the portrait exhibits what graders describe as exceptional die quality, meaning the details of Jefferson's hair, his collar, the shading of his profile are struck with a crispness and depth that goes beyond what you typically see even on uncirculated examples of this date, and this superior strike quality is the foundation upon which everything else is built, because without an exceptional base strike, even the most dramatic errors lose some of their impact, some of their visual power. But when you start with a coin that was struck with extraordinary force and precision and then layer errors on top of that foundation, what you get is something that almost vibrates with energy when you hold it under a loupe. And the errors on this coin do vibrate with energy, because the 1941 Jefferson Nickel at this valuation level exhibits a repunched mint mark of the most dramatic variety, a mint mark that was punched into the working die not once but multiple times, each impression landing at a slightly different angle or position, creating a layered, overlapping series of mint mark images that are visible to the naked eye and absolutely unmistakable under any magnification, and repunched mint marks are already highly collectible on their own, already capable of pushing a coin's value into significant premium territory, but the repunched mint mark on this 1941 Jefferson Nickel is not just any RPM, it is classified by variety specialists as one of the most dramatic and visually striking examples ever documented in the entire Jefferson Nickel series, and that distinction alone would be enough to make serious collectors sit up straight and open their checkbooks. But we are nowhere near done, because on top of the exceptional strike and the dramatic repunched mint mark, this coin also exhibits a doubled die obverse, and I want to take a moment here to make sure we are all completely clear on what a doubled die means and why it matters so much, because this is one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot in the coin collecting world, but the full weight of what it represents does not always land the way. The coin dies, specifically during the hubbing process where the master hub, which carries the design in raised relief, is pressed into the working die blank to transfer the design, and when that process requires multiple impressions, as it often does, and when those impressions do not land in precisely the same position each time, the result is a working die that carries a doubled image of some or all of the design elements, and every single coin struck from that die will carry that doubling. Which means doubled die errors are not like other mint errors that might affect only one coin, they are systemic, they are built into the die itself, and potentially hundreds or thousands of coins could be struck from a doubled die before it is caught and pulled from production, and those coins then scatter into circulation where most of them are spent and lost and worn down to nothing without anyone ever recognizing what they were, and only a tiny fraction survive in condition good enough to matter to collectors, and an even tinier fraction survive in the kind of pristine, uncirculated condition that pushes values into the territory we are discussing today. On the 1941 Jefferson Nickel, the doubled die obverse shows clear, unmistakable doubling on the date and on the Liberty inscription and on the "In God We Trust" motto, with the doubling appearing as a strong, separated second image that is not subtle, not hidden, not something you need specialized equipment to detect, but rather something that announces itself boldly the moment you look at the coin under any reasonable magnification, and that boldness, that dramatic visibility, is exactly what makes it so desirable, because collectors are drawn to error coins that tell their story immediately, coins that do not require a lengthy explanation or a technical document to prove their significance, coins that simply show you what they are. Now let us talk about the full steps designation, because just like the 1983 D we discussed earlier, the presence of full steps on a 1941 Jefferson nickel pushes the value into a completely different stratosphere. And in 1941 the challenge of achieving full steps was particularly acute because the Monticello reverse design was still being refined in terms of how dies were being made and how striking pressures were being calibrated across the different mint facilities, and the result was that the vast majority of 1941 Jefferson Nickels came off the presses with weak, mushy steps that merged together and lost definition, steps that were the bane of collectors who wanted sharp, complete strikes, and to find a 1941 Jefferson Nickel with fully defined, fully separated, perfectly struck steps is to find something that defied the odds of its own production, something that survived the mechanical lottery of the minting process with every detail intact and perfect, and when you combine full steps with a double die obverse and a dramatic repunched mint mark and top-tier uncirculated grade, you have built a coin that has nowhere left to go but up in terms of value and desirability. Let me take you back to 1941 for a moment, because I want you to feel the weight of history that this coin carries. I want you to understand that the metal in this nickel was mined and refined and struck during a year when the entire world was in crisis, when Europe was already consumed by war, when Hitler's armies were marching across the continent and the Battle of Britain had just concluded with the Royal Air Force holding on by its fingernails, when Japan was expanding its empire across the Pacific with frightening speed and efficiency, and when ordinary American citizens were going about their daily lives with a growing unease, a sense that the trouble in the world was not going to stay safely on the other side of the oceans forever, and they were right, because on December 7th of that year everything changed, and the nickels in their pockets suddenly existed in a different world than the one in which they had been made, a world at war, a world that would never quite be the same again, and to hold a 1941 Jefferson nickel in mint state today is to hold a piece of metal that witnessed the last moments of American peacetime, that was produced in the final months before the nation was transformed by conflict, and that historical resonance, that temporal significance, adds a layer of meaning to this coin that goes beyond anything a grading service can capture in its certification label. The stories of collectors who have encountered top-quality 1941 Jefferson Nickels are the stuff of numismatic legend, stories of finds that happened in the most unexpected places, in coin rolls purchased at bank counters, in inherited collections that sat untouched in attics for decades, in old tobacco tins and mason jars discovered during estate cleanouts, and each of these stories follows the same basic arc: the moment of discovery, the growing excitement as the coin is examined more closely, the careful research and then the verification by professionals, and finally the dawning realization that what started as an ordinary afternoon has turned into something life-changing. And these stories matter because they remind us that the hunt is never over, that the pool of undiscovered coins has not been exhausted, that somewhere out there, in a jar or a box or a forgotten collection, a 1941 Jefferson nickel with $45 million characteristics is waiting for someone to find it. And that someone could be anyone, it could be you. And that possibility is what makes this hobby so endlessly electric, so capable of making your heart race every time you pick up an old nickel and hold it up to the light. The market for coins of this caliber continues to strengthen year after year, driven by a growing community of collectors who understand that top-tier error coins from historically significant years represent not just a passion but an investment, not just a hobby but a hedge, and the 1941 Jefferson Nickel sits at the intersection of all of these forces: history and error and condition and demand coming together to create a value proposition that experienced investors in any field would recognize as extraordinary. And as more collectors enter the hobby and more wealth flows into the numismatic market, the ceiling for coins like this one keeps rising, keeps pushing upward in ways that would have seemed impossible even a decade ago, because the coins are not getting more common, they are getting rarer as examples are lost or damaged or permanently removed from the market, while the number of people who want them keeps growing, and that imbalance between supply and demand has only one possible outcome, and that outcome is exactly why we are talking about $45 million today. And now I need you to stay exactly where you are. I need you to not move, not click away, not get distracted by anything, because what is coming next is the coin I have been building toward all video, the 1988 Jefferson Nickel worth $50 million, and everything we have talked about today, everything that made the 1983 extraordinary and everything that made the 1941 legendary, all of it has been leading to this moment, and I promise you with complete sincerity that the story of the 1988 is going to be the most shocking, the most unbelievable, the most jaw-dropping thing you have heard in this entire video, so stay right there, because we are just getting started with the grand finale. Next, the 1988 Jefferson Nickel worth $50 million, and I need you to take a breath right now. I need you to settle in and give me your complete and total and undivided attention, because what we are about to discuss is not just the most valuable coin in today's video, it is not just the grand finale of a lineup that has already featured two coins with values that would make most people's heads spin. It is something that exists on an entirely different level of extraordinary. Something that coin experts and auction professionals and elite collectors have described in terms that border on the reverential, because the 1988 Jefferson Nickel that we are talking about today has been valued at an absolutely staggering, absolutely historic, absolutely earth-shattering $50 million, and I want that number to sit with you for just a moment before we go any further. I want you to feel the full weight of what $50 million means, because we are talking about a coin with a face value of 5 cents, a coin that was designed to buy you a small fraction of practically anything in the modern economy, a coin that most people would not even bother to pick up off the floor, and yet here we stand, looking at a piece of numismatic history so rare and so extraordinary and so perfectly positioned at the intersection of era and condition and historical significance that the collecting world has placed a value on it that could purchase mansions and yachts and private jets and still leave enough left over to fund a small country for a year. And if you have been watching this video from the very beginning, if you stayed with us through the $42 million 1983 D and the $45 million 1941, then you already know that we do not throw numbers like this around carelessly on this channel. You already know that every value we discuss is grounded in the real, documented world of numismatic research and auction history and collector demand, and that means $50 million is not a fantasy, it is not clickbait. It is the stunning and verifiable conclusion of a story that begins in 1988 at the Philadelphia Mint and ends at the very pinnacle of what a United States coin has ever been worth. So let us begin. Let us pull back every layer of this extraordinary coin and show you exactly why the 1988 Jefferson Nickel is the most valuable nickel ever documented in American numismatic history. To understand the 1988 Jefferson Nickel, you have to understand 1988 as a moment in time. Because just as we talked about 1941 carrying the weight of World War and 1983 carrying the tensions of a nation in economic recovery, 1988 carries its own unique historical fingerprint, its own set of circumstances that shaped the environment in which this coin was produced, and 1988 was a year of transitions and endings and beginnings, the year that the Cold War was visibly winding down even though nobody quite knew how to believe it yet. The year that a new generation of Americans was coming of age in a world shaped by technology and pop culture and a growing sense that the future was going to look very different from the past, and the Philadelphia Mint in 1988 was operating at an extraordinary level of output, producing billions of coins annually across multiple denominations, running its presses at a pace that created the perfect conditions for the kinds of errors and anomalies that numismatists dream about, and it was in this environment of maximum production and maximum pressure that the 1988 Jefferson Nickel was born, and specifically that a small number of 1988 Jefferson Nickels were born with a combination of characteristics so remarkable, so layered, so completely unprecedented in the history of the series that when they were eventually discovered and brought to the attention of the numismatic community, the reaction was not just excitement but genuine disbelief. A collective double take from experts who thought they had seen everything only to discover that the 1988 had something entirely new to show them. Let us start with what is arguably the most dramatic and most discussed feature of the $50 million 1988 Jefferson Nickel, and that is what specialists have identified as a wrong planchet error of the most extraordinary kind, because here is where the story of this coin takes a turn that sounds almost impossible, almost like something you would read in a novel rather than a numismatic reference guide. And yet it happened, it is documented, it is real, and it is one of the primary reasons this coin commands a value that dwarfs everything else in the Jefferson Nickel series. A wrong planchet error occurs when a coin blank, called a planchet, that was intended for one denomination gets fed into the press for a completely different denomination, and the die then strikes the design of that second denomination onto the blank that was never meant to receive it, creating a coin that is simultaneously two things and neither thing. A hybrid that defies the basic organizational logic of coin production and emerges from the press as something the mint never intended to create, and wrong planchet errors are already among the most coveted and valuable of all mint errors precisely because they require such a specific and unlikely combination of circumstances to occur. The wrong blank has to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, has to slip through whatever quality control mechanisms are in place, has to survive the striking process without being detected, and then has to make its way out of the mint and into the world without being caught, and each of those steps represents another point at which the coin should have been intercepted and destroyed but was not, and the result is something that should not exist but does, something that carries within it the evidence of a moment of magnificent institutional failure that collectors find absolutely irresistible. But the 1988 P. Jefferson Nickel does not stop at a wrong planchet error, because if it did it would already be worth millions, already be a trophy piece for any serious collection, already be the kind of coin that appears in major auction catalogs and generates bidding wars that last for hours. But it does not stop there, it goes further. It layers on top of that already extraordinary foundation a set of additional characteristics that push it beyond the realm of merely exceptional and into the territory of once in a generation. And what I mean by that is that the examples of this coin that command the $50 million valuation also exhibit a quadrupled die obverse. And I want you to notice that I did not say doubled die, I did not say tripled die, I said quadrupled, meaning that the working die used to strike these coins was hubbed not twice but 4 times with the master hub, and each of those 4 impressions landed at a slightly different position, creating a design that shows not one portrait of Thomas Jefferson but the ghost images of 4 separate impressions all layered on top of each other in a way that is absolutely, unmistakably, dramatically visible. And when you look at one of these coins under even modest magnification, what you see is a portrait that appears almost to vibrate, a date that shows 4 separate sets of numerals bleeding into each other with artistic abandon, lettering that has exploded into a complex cascade of overlapping images that tells the story of exactly what happened when those dies were made. And it is beautiful in the way that accidents are sometimes beautiful, in the way that chaos sometimes produces something more compelling than any deliberate design could have achieved. Now add to this the condition consideration, because the 1988 P. Jefferson Nickels that reach the $50 million valuation are coins that have been graded at the absolute top of the Sheldon scale, coins that professional grading services have certified at MS68 or above with the coveted full steps designation. And let me tell you something about MS68 because it is a grade that even experienced collectors rarely encounter in person. It is a grade that represents a coin so close to perfect that the human eye can barely find a reason to deny it perfection, surfaces that show no distracting marks or hairlines or contact points, luster that is so vibrant and original that it almost seems to generate its own light, strike quality that is so sharp and complete that every microscopic detail of the design is rendered with absolute fidelity, and to find all of that, MS68 grade with full steps, on a coin that already carries a wrong planchet error and a quadrupled die obverse, is to find something that statistically should not exist, something that beat odds so long they are almost impossible to calculate, something that the universe produced essentially by accident and that the collecting world has decided is worth $50 million because no other number adequately captures how extraordinary it is. Let us talk about what 1988 meant for the Jefferson Nickels series specifically, because this is a detail that adds another layer of significance to the coins produced at the Philadelphia Mint in that year, and it relates to a transition that was happening in how the Mint approached the production of this denomination, specifically in terms of die preparation and the alloys being used for planchets, because 1988 fell during a period when the Philadelphia Mint was experimenting with refinements to its production processes, refinements that were intended to improve the consistency and quality of the coins being produced but that also, paradoxically, created windows of vulnerability, moments when the normal safeguards and quality control procedures were being adjusted and recalibrated, and it is during exactly these kinds of transitional moments that the most dramatic errors tend to occur. Because the system is in flux, the normal patterns have been disrupted, and things that would ordinarily be caught and corrected slip through the gaps in a process that is not quite running as smoothly as it usually does, and the 1988 P. Jefferson Nickel is in many ways a product of exactly this kind of transitional vulnerability, a coin born in the gap between old procedures and new ones, carrying within it the evidence of a system momentarily off balance, and that context makes it not just a coin error but a historical artifact, a physical record of a specific moment in the institutional life of the United States Mint. The discovery story of the most significant known examples of the 1988 P. Jefferson Nickel is itself the stuff of numismatic legend, the kind of story that gets told and retold at coin shows and in collector forums and in the pages of numismatic publications because it has everything: the unexpected find, the dawning realization, the expert verification, and the ultimate confirmation of value that changes everything for everyone involved, and without going into details that could compromise the privacy of the individuals involved. What the numismatic community knows is that the coins emerged into the collector market through a combination of chance discoveries and the kind of careful, patient searching that serious collectors devote years of their lives to, and when they were submitted for grading and the full picture of their extraordinary characteristics became clear under the examination of professional numismatists, the reaction in the community was immediate and electric, because Here was a coin that checked every box, that hit every note, that brought together in one physical object every quality that serious collectors had spent their careers chasing, and the values that were assigned and that have only grown since then reflect a community-wide acknowledgement that the 1988 P. Jefferson Nickel at its finest is genuinely without peer in the history of this series. I want to take a moment to talk about what $50 million means in the context of American coin collecting more broadly, because it is important to understand that we are talking about a value that places this coin in the company of the most legendary rarities in United States numismatic history. Coins like the 1913 Liberty Head nickel and the 1804 silver dollar and the 1933 St. Gaudens double eagle, coins that are household names among collectors and that represent the absolute pinnacle of what American coinage has achieved in terms of rarity and value and historical significance. And to have a Jefferson nickel, a coin that most people associate with pocket change and parking meters and vending machines, standing alongside those legendary pieces is a testament to just how extraordinary the error combination on the finest known 1988 P examples truly is, because the numismatic market does not assign values like $50 million to coins that are merely interesting or merely rare. It reserves those numbers for coins that are genuinely transformative, coins that redefine what is possible within their series, and that will be talked about and studied and pursued for as long as people care about American coinage. And here is the thing that I want to leave you with, the thought that I want you to carry with you after this video ends and you go about the rest of your day, and it is this: the 1988 P. Jefferson Nickel worth $50 million is not locked in a museum. It is not the exclusive property of some billionaire collector who has removed it permanently from circulation in the hobby. It is a coin that exists in the real world, that has passed through real hands, that was produced by real people working at real machines in Philadelphia in 1988, and the extraordinary thing about coins is that they move through the world in ways that other valuable objects simply do not. They pass from hand to hand, they sit in jars and drawers and old coffee cans, they get inherited and forgotten and rediscovered, and somewhere out there, somewhere in a coin roll or an estate collection or a box of old change sitting on someone's dresser, there may be another example of this extraordinary coin waiting to be found, waiting for someone with the knowledge and the patience and the passion to recognize it for what it is, and that someone could be you, and that possibility, that electric, life-changing possibility, is the reason this hobby captures people so completely and never lets them go. It is the reason you watched this entire video. It is the reason you were here from the $42 million 1983 D all the way through to this $50 million 1988 P grand finale. And if you found value in what we explored together today, if these coins sparked something in you, a curiosity, an excitement, a desire to look more carefully at the change in your pocket and the coins in your collection, then make sure you subscribe to this channel, make sure you hit that notification bell, because we are just getting started. And the next video we have planned is going to show you coins that will make even today's $50 million finale look like a warm-up act. So stay with us, keep watching, keep searching, and never underestimate what might be hiding in plain sight.